Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Josh Meyer, the founder of Peak Legacy Partners. Today, I'm happy to have my guest with me, who is Greg Schenk, the president of Schenk Company, an award-winning tenant advisory services firm, where he specializes and advises clients in commercial real estate transactions. Also, fun fact that Greg is actually the only agent in the Columbus, Ohio market that exclusively represents buyers only and tenants. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Josh, and help your listeners.
Awesome. Yeah, can't wait to get going. In fact, we're doing an audio only edition today. I thought I would share quickly with the audience that you're on the road. I think ultimately making your way down to South Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, after I'm heading to Traverse City to my mom's for Thanksgiving, and then Sunday I head down to South Florida for the winter.
That's amazing. And I would imagine that some of the advice and the wisdom that you impart into your clients has allowed you to kind of create your own legacy in a way where you're able to spend a good portion of the year, the winter months, which is the smart way to do it, in South Florida. Can you shed any light on that for us?
Sure. My goal was always to be able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, where I want. And I've worked hard enough and smart enough that I've been able to do that. And I think this is the fourth winter I'll be going down there and doing that. Able to work mobile, which seems to be much more acceptable today. I'm not sure it would have been 20 or 30 years ago, but that was really a big goal of mine. So to be able to do it and now teach people how to do it brings me a lot of satisfaction.
Yes, that's fantastic. Yeah, especially in real estate, the technology certainly wasn't where it needed to be able to do that, remotely or by distance, I'm sure, going a ways back. So very nice. Greg actually you're a fellow graduate of the Fisher College of Business at the Ohio State University, which actually is where I went to school as well. I would imagine that you got into commercial real estate pretty early on after graduation. What was college experience like for you? How did you get into real estate initially as your calling, and did you kind of know that was your thing right away?
Yeah. Well, so I'm glad you asked. I was fortunate enough to receive the Evans Scholarship to Ohio State, which was from golf caddying, scholastics, and financial need. And if any of your listeners are golfers or had caddies growing up, that's what I did. I was a golf caddy for about 8 years, from 5th grade through high school. I didn't even know about this scholarship. Someone I caddied for told me about it. I was fortunate enough to get it, and it was renewable every quarter based on your grades. So you basically couldn't screw around. And I did not have a clue what I wanted to do when I was in college. I just didn't know. I knew I didn't want to be poor anymore. And that was the driving factor, to not be a burden on my mom. My mom was a single mom, and I worked 2 jobs all through high school and college. And I got into marketing because I just thought that was the most general business degree. I thought maybe I'd be a teacher, but then I saw what teachers were making, and I said, well, that's not going to happen. So I thought I'd probably get into sales. I had a lot of friends and family sales and in the insurance business. But when I got out of school, the economy was probably the worst it had been. I had wanted to stay in Columbus, and there were no jobs, and interest rates were 17%, which you probably can't remember that far back. But things were pretty bleak. And I took a job with a company, just happened to get a job that said we could move you anywhere in the U.S. And I was going to sell foreign car engine parts, pistons, bearings, and valves, something I knew nothing about, had never seen any of them in my life. And I figured it was the biggest challenge that I could do to get out of my comfort zone and really see if I had what it took. And I was a test case for this company. Everybody that worked there was pretty much car buffs, engine buffs, engineer backgrounds. So they brought me in, and they threw me in a machine shop for 4 months, taught me how to tear apart engines and put them together. All my friends said, you're going to be fired in 2 weeks. None of them thought I would last a month, because they knew I didn't like to get dirty. I'd never changed my own oil. I mean, I literally was the antithesis of somebody getting into that area. But the confidence of going into that machine shop and learning how to tear apart engines and put them back together, the confidence that gave me just really was phenomenal. And they ended up moving me out to LA and kind of threw me to the wolves and gave me a territory that was bigger than the state of Ohio. 21 years old, I'm driving 100 to 200 miles a day, one direction or another, selling these engine parts. And fortunately, I was a good listener to what the clients wanted, and I got them to open up a warehouse in the heart of LA, and I became their leading salesman within 2.5 years. Not because I knew anything about engine parts, but because I listened to what the clients wanted. And I've tried to take that with me in my career since then. Well, about 4 years later, I got tired of the high cost of living out there and came back to Ohio for a friend's wedding and had a feeling at home. And quit my job and moved back to Columbus for a straight commission position doing commercial real estate. And so it was another very big challenge. And I basically set some very high goals. And I said, I'll give it 2 years. And if it doesn't work, I'll move back. And the same exact thing happened. All my friends said, you're crazy, you're nuts, you're living on the beach in California to move back to Ohio. I was killing it. I was with the biggest company in the country. 7 years later, I did the biggest deal in the state. And I left that company to go out on my own to start my own exclusive tenant rep business. And this past September, 3 months ago, was my 28-year anniversary of having my own business. And to differentiate myself, I started speaking and teaching first in Ohio, then around the country about what's going on in the market and how to prosper in it, to help professionals get a foundation for lifelong success, whether they were other real estate agents, professionals that wanted to learn the market to help their company, or private investors that wanted to learn about investment property acquisition.
Wow, that's incredible. I can relate to a lot of parts of your story as far as just challenging kind of norms and diving into things that, facing your fears, I guess, to an extent, right?
Right. Yeah.
Would you say that obviously that's served you very well personally and in your own professional situation? Would you say that that has any implications in having that confidence and that attitude in terms of what you actually do and looking at real estate strategically and coming up with strategies that help people, just kind of going into things head first and not having any trepidation or fear in challenging markets or anything like that?
Well, very much so. So my doctor, when I turned 50, said, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And I think people to grow in life, once you've hit some big goals, or even before, if you don't get out of your comfort zone, you'll never grow as a person, both personally and professionally. So every time I tried a new challenge, I was definitely very uncomfortable. Going from a job with a company car, expense account, and salary to straight commission was very scary. Going from the biggest company to going out on my own, a one-man shop, very scary. Investing in investment property, putting a 6-figure down payment on a property when you grew up with nothing, very scary. But I teach people about risk tolerance, which there's no right or wrong answer, and putting together a strategy to try to see what's going to keep them up at night, what's going to let them sleep at night, how long are they going to hold a property, how much do they have to put in, and what's their exit strategy. And unfortunately, many people don't look at all those things, and they get emotionally tied to things, and that's when things go haywire.
Right. Yeah, the risk tolerance is so important. That's in our business. That's a huge thing as well. Do you have a specific tool or a process to help somebody really uncover? Because from my experience in working with clients, people always overestimate their risk tolerance. But then when you get very specific and say, would this situation be acceptable? How they respond to those types of questions is usually indicative that their risk tolerance is quite a bit lower than what they would self-report as.
Yes,
do you have?
Yes, yep. I would agree with that 100%. We have a forum on our website. If you go to schenkcompany.com under Get Started, one for tenants looking for space to lease or buy, and one for investors. And it kind of goes from a shotgun to a rifle approach, the who, what, why, when, and where. And we just ask a lot of open-ended questions to try to really get a feel for all those things to help them. And I agree with you 100%. Most people talk big, but when it really comes down to it, and I've had groups of 25 doctors where 8 had risk, 8 didn't have risk, 8 didn't have any money. So you come up with a lot of things, or a husband and wife where one is more, risk tolerant than the other. One doesn't want to spend. So it's all about communication and really going through all the what ifs, everything bad that can happen, and really narrowing it down to say, okay, this is something that I'm willing to be uncomfortable with, to take the risk, and this is what my possible return can be.
Right. And you work primarily with business owners, entrepreneurs, so their risk tolerance probably tends to be slightly higher than the average person, right? Is that your main demographic that you work with?
I would say that's pretty true, but a lot of small business owners are too busy working in the business instead of taking a step back and working on it. So my biggest challenge is getting them to get out of their day-to-day, think long-term, whether it's for their own facilities or whether it's for an investment property.
Right. Yeah. And that goes for exiting real estate and also exiting, their business as a whole. We see that as well. But can you go a little bit deeper on exactly kind of who your ideal client with, what types of, people are usually a good fit to help them, assist them with real estate transactions, whether it's from on the leasing side or purchasing a commercial property?
Well, the beauty of it is we can help almost anybody that leases or owns a property. We could help. We do a no-cost review of their lease. We have a 44-point lease checklist that we'll go over. Right now, across the U.S., the office vacancy is as high as it's ever been in the 38 years I've been doing this. So there's a tremendous amount of people we're doing early lease renewals or restructuring existing leases for, because so many people aren't back in the office 5 days a week. It's only like 35 to 40% are back in the office 5 days a week, and about 60% are only in 2 to 3 days a week. So I go in with a company and figure out, what do they really want to do? And again, a lot of them don't have a strategic plan set up yet. And I'll give them the pros and cons and the options that are out there, whether they renew, whether they downsize, or whether they relocate. Well, most of my clients are privately held companies. I get a lot of referrals from around the country that'd be a Fortune 1000, but I'm typically dealing directly with the business owner. Probably about 80% office, and then the rest are either warehouse, retail, and then investors from various sorts. But like right now, I'm working with a huge manufacturer that's a pretty complicated situation where they have office, warehouse, lab, and manufacturing. Earlier this year, I helped a financial planner. I helped a lot of software companies. I used to do a lot of medical. I haven't done quite as bit of medical. So we can really help about anybody, but I study the market about 3 hours a day. And because I speak and teach around the country, and I have a think tank group of 10 guys that were all with a big company and all left, went on our own. So we have a conference call every week and talk about what's happening around the country and every product type from each person's perspective.
I love that mastermind approach. That's so valuable.
Yeah, we're not competing with one another. We're helping. We refer. We've invested together. I built a strip center with one of the guys in Northern Virginia about 2008. So we've done a lot together. And it's really helped us each grow, again, as a person, both individually and professionally. So I encourage anybody, if they don't have a think tank group, a mastermind group, whatever you want to call it, to surround yourself with that, as well as I always advise people to surround themselves with trusted advisors, which in our area is usually your real estate attorney, your accountant, your banker, your financial planner, your insurance agent, contractor, architect. So when you have these situations come up, that you have somebody you can trust. And I usually will introduce them to some of those people in the process if they don't already have a pre-existing relationship, or maybe they're going into a new city for an opportunity and they don't know anybody in that city. I may be introducing them to 10 different people.
Yeah, so important. Couldn't have said that better myself. Let's go back for a moment to that review, the lease review that you do for clients. That seems like an incredibly valuable service. When you do go through those leases and review them, what are some of the opportunities you see that people have to improve their situation, and potentially whether it's, freeing up cash flow or just, well, I guess I'll allow you to tell me what opportunities are present when you do those, but what are you seeing in those?
Well, the biggest thing, there's usually 5 or 6 clauses that are so slanted toward the landlord, the tenants really get screwed. And the biggest one is the notification period and the holdover period. So many times people come to me after the notice period's already expired, which means, you have to give the landlord notice whether you're going to renew or whether you're going to leave and relocate. Okay. And then the holdover, sometimes you pay double the rent on holdover if you stay in the space after your lease expires. So I can't tell you how many people come to me after the fact instead of being proactive and really get killed because of those items. So our goal when we go in is to find those 5 or 6 clauses, point those out to them. Now, I don't play attorney. I work with the real estate attorney. I negotiate on the business terms and conditions and work with the real estate attorney, but we save them a lot of legal expense because we've outlined the real clauses that are really penalizing to them. And the lawyer then provides the right language to protect them.
Right. But it's key that you can identify those things, right?
Yes. And then on top of that, so like you said earlier, we're helping them reduce overhead, whether it's for their base rent, controlling the operating expenses, maybe getting them some free rent or something else that's important to them, more parking, signage on the building, better heating and cooling system, better property management. Everybody's got a different hot button, but typically people bitch and complain about the heating and cooling more than what rent they're paying. So even in some nice buildings, if they've overloaded too many people in the space, that's a big thing that we hear complaints about, or poor property management in general. I've got a gym I'm helping right now. They think they're getting screwed on the operating expenses, taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance, janitorial. Some landlords use that as a profit center and throw in extra money. So we'll do an audit on that and see if they're, getting overcharged or not. But there's 4 pools of money that I think your listeners would like to understand that we can negotiate on. First is the base rent. And every landlord looks at it from 4 different things: the credit of the tenant, the length of the term of the lease, the amount of space they're leasing, and the cost of the build out that the landlord is contributing. So that's very important to understand that. So a Fortune 500 is going to get a different deal than a mom and pop. A 10-year lease is different than a 3-year lease. A 100,000-foot tenant is different than a 10,000-foot tenant. And if the landlord's putting $50 or $100 a foot into it, it's different if you're putting $20. So every lease that we're analyzing, we're looking at those 4 factors. So that's why we need all that information up front from the tenant. And once we've done that no cost review and the client profile form, which is online, we'll hook them up with a space planner to do a generic non-building specific space plan to see how much they really need now, which could change dramatically from what they needed before. Because again, in some instances, 60% of the people are working from home.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's super valuable. So for people who are just entering into, a new lease or even potentially a purchase, what are some misconceptions that people enter into that process with? I think it's great that it's awesome you identify, obviously opportunities and problems with existing. But what do you think people either brand new or, going from leasing to purchasing, what are some mistakes that you could help them avoid?
Well, first of all, a lot of people don't know that our services exist. Most people call off a sign, which is a listing agent that represents the seller or the landlord. So the big reason tenant representation came about was because people were getting screwed. And before 1989, it was let the buyer beware. And there was a lot of people really getting hammered on these things. So then they instituted the agency disclosure law. And then from that, everybody had to sign a form of who represents whom in a transaction. Okay, so that really changed things a great deal. So now every landlord knows that the tenant has a right to have representation. So that's first and foremost, because most people are only doing this once every 5, 7, or 10 years.
Right. Yeah, with those longer lease terms, what percentage of people do you think actually have a representative on the buyer tenant side?
Well, more than they did in the past, for sure. But doing it without it is like going to court without an attorney.
Right.
So the analogy that I use, it'd be like going to court without an attorney or having your taxes done without a CPA. You're going to get hammered, and the landlord or their listing agent is licking their chops if you don't have somebody. But the big things to look out for is the quality of the landlord. Do they have money to do tenant improvement allowances or not? Okay, so that's huge. Like I just had a landlord that didn't have any money for tenant improvement allowances. And so we got more free rent to offset that. So I'll ask my client every time again, is what's their hot buttons? And once I understand their hot buttons, it's different for everybody. So if they're growing, it may be to control rent or get free rent to help offset the move, whatever the case may be. But doing that generic space plan, which almost nobody does, that's something I say that's very unique to my business, that I've got enough space planners that will help me to do that, can help people visualize. Most people are visual of what they exactly need. And most of the clients are downsizing, or what we call right sizing, restructuring the lease into maybe a nicer space with less square footage. Certainly the Fortune 500 companies, that's been the trend. They're going into very expensive, nice space to entice employees to come back to work more days a week.
Does that make things more competitive for the little guys, since the some of the bigger corporations are becoming in the same market as maybe a relatively small, closely held businesses?
Well, I would say normally that would be the case, but because the vacancy is so high, it hasn't been. And another thing I should point out, most downtown markets are suffering really bad. The suburban markets in most markets are doing pretty good. So it's much more incentive driven downtown. Again, people aren't wearing suits and going back to the office downtown. They got fat and lazy after COVID, and most of them are sitting at home, which is really the truth. And so in our market in Columbus, the amount of incentives we can get, but I haven't had the demand from my clients, to want to do that. So that's been very big. But the big thing is start early. And I have a separate seminar I do called the top 10 mistakes list that tenants make. But starting early is the big thing. If we could start 12 to 18 months before a lease expires, you're going to make a lot more incentives than if you're waiting until your notice period and the landlord's really got you. But today, as long as they're willing to extend the lease, we do a lot of leases, what we call blend and extend, where we may downsize or right size and extend the lease and get some rent offset from that as well. But most of my clients are down to earth, very practical people, just trying to get quality space. They're not going out for the Taj Mahal. They're not going out for the super high-end build-out space, which differs greatly than the Class A Fortune 500 users that are out there.
Right. Makes sense. I ask you to share a couple of stories with me here, if you don't mind. And of course, obviously, any stories you have to share, we'll ask to, keep personal information private, obviously. But do you have a story where you're in the process of working somebody or somebody was considering using your services, and you maybe made some recommendations and they had the opportunity to implement some of your advice and they didn't take advantage of that, and you saw something maybe not work out so well for them in light of maybe not taking your advice or not working with you directly?
Yes, I actually have had a huge situation happen like that not that long ago. A financial planning group owned a building and had 3 or 4 offices in Central Ohio, and they wanted to combine it all into one. And they had already been down the road 99% before they brought me in. So they didn't bring me in from the beginning, which was probably a mistake. And they basically asked me, they knew of my reputation, and they asked me my advice of, is this a good situation or should we do something else? And I did some research and I found out if they did what they said they were going to do, they were going to lose about $2 million. And I found them a situation that would have saved them that $2 million in a brand new building. There would have been no disruption of service, because when you're renovating a building and people have to be displaced for 8 or 9 months, I mean, that's a huge disruption of service. So they were going to combine 3 or 4 offices into one and expand an existing building and totally gut it and redo it, which in today's market, and especially when they started, very expensive to do. I mean, not a little expensive, very expensive. Cost to construct today, it's come down a little bit in the last few months, but earlier this year it was literally record high construction cost. So this group, the owner was wealthy enough he could afford to do it, but he basically asked me, Greg, how much am I going to lose by doing this? And I said $2 million, and they decided to go ahead with it. And to the life of me, I can't understand why. And I said, maybe they're charging their clients too much. But they basically said their clients liked that location so much that they didn't want to leave it. But yet in my mind, in my opinion, the other location I had was actually a better location. They could have had huge signage and, again, no disruption of service, which in my mind is very important. So it's hard to make everybody happy, for sure. The biggest thing is asking a lot of those open-ended questions. But in this case, I was brought on as a consultant, not as a tenant rep broker, because they'd already, again, been down the road about 99%. But I'm happy to say that most people that do take my advice, are very happy with it. We've got over 500 letters of recommendation. We've been fortunate to win about every award you can win in business in the industry. I was fortunate to win the Micro Entrepreneur of the Year award for real estate. I was 2-time Small Business Person of the Year nominee. I'm in the Hall of Fame and for Midwest real estate. So I'm very fortunate to have won. And I wrote a book about 10 years ago. I've probably written 100 articles on various subjects. So usually once I'm retained, people are listening to what I want, unless their situation changes. I mean, I had a situation back in '08 when the market crashed where I had a huge lender who was about to triple in size. They had a lease out for signature. They had already told their employees, it had already been on TV and in the newspaper. And the next day, their lender pulled the rug out and the deal got killed. So here they had already told all their employees were moving. It was about 20 minutes away from where they were, brand new building. And I was counting the money. I mean, it was a big deal. And so it was very frustrating. So it's a very high risk, high reward business. But for the tenant or the investor out there, the key is to start early, get as much information, disclose as much information. It's a relationship. Some people look at it as a transaction. I'm a relationship oriented company. So I look to have somebody as a client for life once I start with them. I helped a really good example, the disciplinary council of the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio. And I always tell people, if I can make the Supreme Court happy, I can make anyone happy. And we helped them 3 times in 10 years. And when they moved, their employees couldn't afford to park downtown anymore. And their build out cost was almost $700,000. So I had to get a landlord to be able to do $700,000 with a build out cost, plus get the rent reduced, plus take care of the parking. And we found one to do it. So they were unbelievably happy to do that. We just helped a 3D printing warehouse company about 18 months ago that went out when the warehouse vacancy was the lowest it ever was. And we found a landlord that gave them about $150,000 to widen the door to be able to get these huge 3D printers in and give them the electrical power that they needed, which was extremely difficult at that point when industrial vacancy was under 2%. So it really varies by when the market changes. I mean, we've had a lot of ups and downs. Fortunately, I don't know where all your listeners are coming from, but Central Ohio is the second fastest growing city in the U.S. Most markets are doing pretty good, but most downtowns and office are not doing so good. So there's really difference between product type and market location of how much the incentives are going to be. And every market's very different.
Right. How about a quick story on the other side of the equation, somebody that you did work with that you feel really proud to have, created a massive impact, by utilizing your unique expertise?
Well, the Supreme Court one that I just discussed was phenomenal. And probably my biggest client, my most successful, was Dave Bianconi from Progressive Medical. They were on the Business First Fast 50 list 15 straight years. And we helped them build a building. And when we built it, he started getting upset saying, this is way too big. I'm never going to move into the second floor. And 2 years later, they outgrew it and added 80,000 feet onto the building. And they went from $7 million a year in sales to $270 million a year in sales. And I basically, had negotiated options to expand where the building was on more land. And that saved him a couple $1 million not having to move after just building a building. So he was ecstatic and he continued to do that. And he did so well. He sold the company and he donated the building to his church. The church sold it for like $13 million. So he made enough money from the sale that he could give away a $13 million asset. Was something I was very, very, very proud of, and just a great guy who became a very good friend on top of a great client.
Everybody wins there. Absolutely. And I bet that's not the first time you've heard somebody say, this is the last time, we're never moving again, and have that not be the case, right?
Oh, yeah. There's some fast growing. I've helped a lot of the Fast 50 from Business First. And those are very exciting. And Columbus has got a lot of those. And I've helped a lot of startups that were working out of their basement and just have really gone very, very fast. So it's exciting. Very exciting.
Yep. Nice. What would you say, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, what would you say is your number one hurdle in continuing your successful path thus far as a tenant and buyer's rep?
Well, it's a very high risk, high reward business. It takes a lot of energy, number one. And as I get older, I don't know if I always have the energy to do it. It's all about meeting the right people. For me, it's a relationship oriented. How much do I want to go out and meet people or people that are referred to me? I love to speak and teach. I would do it every day of my life if I could. I love to educate in that. It's just getting the right opportunities at the right places is the challenge. COVID really hurt that a great deal by people doing webinars rather than in person. I much prefer doing face-to-face in person, seeing people's eyes, seeing if they have a question. If somebody asks a question, somebody else will usually piggyback and ask another question. That's probably been the biggest hurdle, is getting people back into the offices and more face-to-face meetings, things of that nature.
Right. What's the most rewarding aspect?
Well, helping people that, 20 years later, they still remember me, that we did a good job. Obviously, it's let me live my dreams from a kid that grew up with nothing. At 21, I didn't have a nickel to my name, and at 40, I was a self-made millionaire. So it's been a great journey, and now it's all about helping other people. I really love to give back. It's what I was taught, from my mom, and just expanding and continue with that makes me very proud. And teaching my son, I've been a single dad for a long time, teaching my son all those things about financial literacy and a work ethic and helping others.
That's fantastic. And I think your success truly is an indication of your character and your values and the decisions that you make on a daily basis. So I commend and applaud you, not just for your success professionally, but for who you are and the decision, how you choose to live out your living legacy. Greg, how do people find you if they would like to speak with you about helping their situation?
Yeah, the easiest way is our website, which is schenkcompany.com, SCHENK, company spelled out.com, or I'm on LinkedIn under Greg Schenk. I'm under Twitter, Greg Schenk, or the Schenk Company. Any of those, Twitter, now X, they can find me, and I'm happy to help anyone. Again, we'll do a no-cost review of anyone's lease in over 50 markets in the U.S. and 100 around the world. There's probably no place we don't have an expert that knows the market like I know Central Ohio.
Excellent. And any final thoughts?
Well, to people, to live life to the fullest, get out of your comfort zone, and help others once you've had the success surpass what you're doing.
Tremendous advice. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving and happy holidays.
Thanks again. Everybody in the audience, thank you for listening. This has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Josh Meyer, and my guest again today was Greg Schenk. For more information, as he said, on Greg and the work that he does, please visit his website at Schenk Company, which is SCHENK company spelled out.com. That will all be in the show notes as well. And while you're there, make sure you to check out all the other educational opportunities that Greg put together for everybody's benefit so that everybody wins just like he does his business. So thank you again, and we'll sign off.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.